Thank you, Ed McMahon or Edna McMahon. Appreciate that. So, my friends, while Kermit may bring a smile to our face, hi, Marlena, welcome. Certainly, the words of that song are very serious. And one of the things we're going to be doing tonight is in our review is give you a chance to share any issues that you have with this story, and have a chance to talk about that and unpack it maybe in a way that makes a little bit more sense for the times that we're living in, and maybe for some of us the challenges that we've had in our life vis-a-vis alcohol and violence. Alrighty, so without further ado, I am going to share with you Can everybody see that? You know that you can put me, if you want to see it a little better, in speaker view by going to the right-hand upper corner of your screen and choosing speaker view. So then you'll just see me. You won't see everybody, but you'll be able to see the text much easier. All right, so we begin with what might seem to be a complete coinkydinky, that Purim sounds like Yom Kippur, right? So what is, you can see I underscored the word Purim, and in both Purim and Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim. And we learned from this that Purim is like Yom Kippur. I'm sure that many of you have heard this before. Anyone want to just give a shot as to one reason in your mind and your understanding how Purim is like Yom Kippur? Certainly not in the eating department, because on Purim we are instructed to have a festive meal, and there's other foods involved that we give to the needy and to our friends. Scott, please.
Okay, I'm a little confused. I guess I thought that it was Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, that is a day like Purim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I put the
saying
E. Yeah, don't be confused by the plural. that was a mistake.
No, it's not that. It's that literally Yom Kippurim means a day like Purim,
Yes.
Which is to say that Yom Kippur is a day like Purim.
Exactly.
But Purim is a day like Yom Kippur.
Okay. Well, how?
What we're looking at.
Okay,
well, how? I don't know. Is it a two-way street? I guess that's the question.
I know. Let's find out. Anybody? Is this new to anybody? Okay, new to a bunch of you. Alrighty. So I'm going to add to this, but Purim is like Yom Kippur, the day of accepting Torah, that we accepted it again willfully, a more elevated event than Sinai, the rabbis teach us. So if you might remember the Midrash, that the Israelites, Bnei Israel, accepted, quote unquote, the Torah at Sinai. How? By divinity holding the mountain over our heads until we said, oh, that's a good idea, we'll take it. Right? So this Midrash, remember, this is not in Torah, but this is alluding to, I think, the understanding that how could we sign on to something that we had no idea what it was before it was given, right? It's kind of like, I'm thinking, I do a lot of weddings that I officiate at, and I tell people when they're signing the ketubah, that's the wedding contract, that this is kind of like a legal fiction. Now, why is it a legal fiction? It's because the witnesses to the marriage who are signing the ketubah are signing to the fact that about something that hasn't happened yet, right? Those people haven't gotten married yet, and yet they're signing that they heard the words, Harayat Mekadesh li, et cetera, et cetera. You'll be consecrated to me, with the understanding that that is going to happen. But I ask you, what if it's another episode of The Runaway Bride, right? And then afterwards, they've signed a document that is a false document. Well, maybe that's what was going through the mind. Well, maybe not exactly that, but maybe that was going through the mind of Bnei Yisrael at Sinai. So the mountain had to be held over their head. Not so gentle way of saying, take it. And so they did. So in that way, the rabbis are teaching that was in a way a coercion. But on Purim, there is the full acceptance of all of the rules and laws of halakha, of the rules of Jewish law, right? Towards the end of the Megillat Esther, the end of the scroll of Esther. And we take it upon ourselves to do certain mitzvot, which we're going to get to on the next page. Another thing that it has so let's get now to Purim and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippurim, a day that is the word Kippur, you hear the word for Yom Kippur means like. So Yom is a day like Purim, right? Alrighty. So some ways that I understand and that I've learned, and that first of all, lots are cast in both stories. So first of all, in the Purim story, lots are cast to determine on what date Haman's decree will be followed out to annihilate the Jews, right? And so Pur, as in Purim, Pur is a lot, as in Shirley Jackson's famous story of the lottery. Oh, this is nice, Mary Rita. You're right next to Judy in my picture. You're both wearing orange. Far be it for me to interrupt myself. So lots are involved in Purim because the lots are cast in order to determine the date. Now, where are lots cast on Yom Kippur? Anybody? I'll give you a hint, Azazel.
Is it the scapegoat?
Exactly, it's the scapegoat. The lots are cast to see which of the goats are going to be sent to Azazel, which we don't really know what that is, but they'll be sent away, right, into the wilderness, and which will be given up to God, right, which will be offered as a sacrifice. So there are Purim in both the lots in both stories. Now, the main thing that I want to point out about the similarity is that on both days, we're supposed to, both days are within a container that are geared to us reaching a state of non-duality, a state in which we can hold opposites of evil and good, all opposites, darkness and light, black and white, etc., etc. Now, one way to do that is getting drunk as a skunk, right? But as Rabbi Shefa Gold points out, you don't need to get drunk on alcohol to reach that state, right? There is when we yearn to be in union with divinity, to do what's called dveikut, the dabek. It's a Hebrew, modern Hebrew word for glue, to stick to. When we yearn to stick to divinity, to cleave, to yearn, and that ends in a cleaving, the same thing happens. Right? There's a beautiful, beautiful story about God being asked, who's more powerful, you or your people? And God's answer is, oh, my people are definitely more powerful than me. How so? Because I made something out of nothing, but my people can make nothing out of something. Meaning that when we meditate, for instance, if we're so blessed, we can enter into that state of consciousness where all is one, Adonai Echad, which is where how we want to be when we're saying the Shema as well. Okay, everybody with me here? So now, let's read this line from Megillah, the Talmud in Masechet Megillah. Amar Rava, Mechayav. One is obligated. Mechayav inish levasomei befuraya. One is in chayav is an obligation to become intoxicated with wine on Purim, the Puria, that's Aramaic, until the layada bein arur Haman levaruch Mordechai. Until what? Until he does not know how to distinguish between cursed is Haman, arur Haman, right? Levaruch Mordechai. You hear the word Baruch, blessing in there, right? And blessed is Mordechai. To become so intoxicated that all dissolves into that state of consciousness that perhaps sometimes we call yichud, right? You know, after I talked about a wedding ceremony before, after the ceremony, the chatan and kala, the groom and the bride, they are invited to go into yichud. It's called, to go into a room where they're just by themselves, right? And there's an aloneness. There is a few moments just to integrate everything that's happened and just to breathe and be, And when two became one. So that's interesting too, right? Two becomes one, but remains two at the same time. It's kind of a paradox. Alrighty? So this is one of the understandings of our obligations on Purim is to get intoxicated. So I'm again reminding of dedicating this to Mary and her issues with this, which are very understandable. And believe you me, I will not be following this injunction. Next page. We're going to go into a teaching of the Slonimer Rebbe. So the Slonimer Rebbe is the author of Nitivot Shalom, the Paths of Peace. He's a modern Rebbe, right? And he's talking about what we just were unpacking. The idea of obscuring the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai is connected to each of the mitzvot of Purim. Interesting. This idea is connected to each of the mitzvot of Purim. Reading the Megillah, now if you see, I put that in green because in a couple of sentences, you're going to see something else is in green. And so each of the things that are in green are connected to each other and how one results in the next. Reading the Megillah, sending Mishloach Manot, which is gifts to the poor. Erasing Amalek. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a few. And accepting the Torah willfully. Oh, interesting, right? We just talked about that, right? So this is one of the each of these are connected to the, these are each of the some of the mitzvot, sorry. And Purim can be divided into three parts corresponding to three quests for wholeness and serving divinity. So reading the Megillah is connected with wholeness with the Creator. Why? Because it ends up that this is a mitzvah. Is it a mitzvah that was given at Sinai? The answer is no. This is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. There are two different kinds of mitzvot, two different kinds of commandments. A mitzvah d'Rabban, a mitzvah misinai, it's called, that's oraita. You hear the word ora in there? That's from the light, right? L-I-G-H-T. Mitzvah d'Rabbanan is a mitzvah that later on was, by unpacking what they felt is going on in Torah, and of course Purim is not in the 5 books of Moshe. We all, lighting candles on Shabbat is a mitzvah, but it's not mentioned in Torah. It is a mitzvah. It is d'Rabbanan. You hear the word rabbi in d'Rabbanan. Dan.
Just a quick question. When people talk about 613 mitzvot, are those from Sinai, or are those including the ones from the rabbis?
Yes, including the ones from the rabbis.
Okay.
But then they'll tell you that the rabbis got it from Sinai. It's not like they were making this up out of, thin air, but they received the tradition and then unpacked it in a way that we could be using it, that it could be useful. Because as you know, don't see the kid in its mother's milk, huh? And then there was the joke that I've told a number of times ago with that. Alrighty. Sending mishloach manos creates a wholeness with other human beings. So there is connecting with God, connecting with each other, and then finally accepting the Torah willfully connects with wholeness with oneself, because we take this on individually within the context of nationhood. Alrighty. In each, there is an aspect of cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai, and a person is obligated to be drunk on Purim from the holiness of the day. From the holiness of the day until they cannot distinguish between these aspects. You can't distinguish between doing something for God, doing something for yourself, and doing something for each other, because all is one. That, I think, is the Slonimer's brilliant understanding of this. It helps us to move on from the drunken debauchery that often accompanies Purim, and the feelings that many people have about this mitzvah, right? Okay. Any thoughts? Any questions? Yeah, Dan.
The word for drunk in the first page, is that by definition with alcohol, or does it just mean?
And no, it means. Let me go back.
Basur.
Yeah, the word levasome. Yeah, the sommet means a completion, to be so full of, right? So this the translation intoxication here is a step by the translator to help us understand what this means within the context.
And the word wine doesn't appear.
It doesn't appear, exactly right.
So that's
l'shaker, to be shika, that you know that word, to be
right,
shika.
but that's not the word.
That's not the word.
And this is just what one rabbi said. This is not a mitzvah. It's not one of the mitzvot of Purim.
Exactly. It's really minhag. It's not one of the mitzvot. We're getting to the mitzvot.
No, but the word someh is in the actual Megillah, and if it means overwhelmed or overcome by, that's different from drunk.
Yeah. Or we probably can talk about, so we can reach the same conclusion. But yes, exactly right. It's different than drunk.
Okay.
And when it says Megillah 7b, this is not from Megillat Esther. This is from the Talmud.
Oh, okay.
Right? So that's why it says 7b. It's Masechet Megillah. Okay, so it's from the Talmud and the conversations around how do we observe / celebrate the day. Okay. All right, let me go by here. Okay. Regarding the Megillah, this is a continuation of the Slonimer Rebbe. Reading the Megillah is about wholeness with the Creator. There are times that the Holy Blessed One helps a person feel open in mind and heart and close to God. Blessed is Mordechai. Right? That's a blessing. And there are darker times when a person feels distance from divinity. That's the time that we feel cursed is Haman, Arur Haman. That's the times that we feel that darkness. Right? So on Purim, a person is obligated to be drunk. This is the Slonimer's words. I'd have to go back to his Hebrew to tell you what word he uses. But again, he just said it doesn't mean drinking, right? until they cannot distinguish between those two, cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. From Purim, each person should draw deep happiness until the feeling arises in their heart. There's no difference between the times when they feel close to the Holy One and the times when they feel distant or pushed away. That takes a great amount of equanimity, a great amount of faith, I think, to feel that my closeness and my distance to my Creator, that they should feel the same, right? Remember that we're living in material world. We're living in the world of materiality, and in the prophet Isaiah, I've mentioned this teaching many times, he has a vision of the angels running to and fro, Rotz v'shav, running and returning. And that's the way it is. You know, we're not sitting on mountaintops contemplating our navels 24/7. We're not in meditation all day. We're not seeking to be in a state of dveikut because you shouldn't be driving the car, right? You shouldn't be working with heavy machinery. You shouldn't be working with sharp objects, right? This is not a desired state to be in, and nor is it realistic. But what the Slonimer is saying, at all times, we can feel what? We can feel atalifnei mi obeyed, know before who you stand, right? Or we can feel, what is it that we sing on Shabbos morning about, went right off my head. That's what I get for not writing things down. It'll come back to me. But of being close, being aware of God's presence in our life all the time, right? In the same way that Thich Nhat Hanh, blessed memory, while we're walking, right? And then I always like to say while we're washing the dishes or changing a poopy diaper, whatever it is, there is nothing that is not filled with sparks of holiness. And that's what he's reminding us. Dan's got to go. Watch the replay, Dan. It'll be on.
Watch the replay, slow motion.
Skip over the parts where I fumpha, though. Okay. Excellent. Bye-bye, Dan. Say hi to Mary for me.
I will.
All righty. Let's continue. So we need to back up for a second here. I wrote a song about Purim years ago that I'll do on either Sunday night or when we bake together, some of us, or next Wednesday night, where I sing, he was directly descended from Amalek, talking about Haman, about Haman, right? The Torah says in the book of Devarim, in Deuteronomy, it also says it elsewhere. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were leaving Egypt. Erase the memory of Amalek. Do not forget. That is one of the 613 mitzvot. So this might seem a little bit convoluted, to erase the memory of something and don't forget it, right? The first Amalek appeared just as the Jews were making their way towards Sinai, about to cross the Sea of Reeds. The nation of Amalek attacked the Israelites in this moment of extreme vulnerability. All right, so that's the story. And there's also a mystical understanding that through a number of gilgulim, a number of turning over of our souls into different lifetimes, Amalek is Haman. Okay, so that's where the line that he was directly descended from Amalek comes from. But there is a spiritual Amalek. Amalek is numerically equivalent to the Hebrew word safek, which means doubt. And whenever one considers doing a positive thing, Amalek introduces doubt into one's mind. What are we talking about here? What is sometimes, what are we referring to in this Amalek? There's the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, right? That sits over here. You know, they're like, you know, sometimes you see a little cartoon, right? The angel here and the devil there. and the Yetzer Hara is trying to like knock us down, to help us forget, make us forget who we are, what our essence is, what our mission, what deployment in this lifetime is. So Amalek introduces doubt in one's mind, and certainly you can understand this coming. If remember that what Amalek did was to attack from the rear the women and children and the disabled as we were making our way through the desert. And so it makes sense why we would feel unsafe, and unsafe too, when anyone is in a position of power to attack us from the rear when we least expect it, when we're feeling safe, perhaps feeling safe in a country that has invited us in, where we have thrived, where we have brought great wealth to the country, and then like a dime, things changed. All right, let me stop for a moment before we move on to the next page. Anybody? Okay, moving on. What are the 4 mitzvot of Purim? Number 1, reading the Megillah. Now, whether or not you have to hear the entire Megillah is safek. Or whether you just need to hear one line. What if you hear it in English, a language that we understand? Are we fulfilling the mitzvah? Good question. Number 2, sending mishloach manot, or gift baskets. Sure, shooting, we have 1 or 2 people every year who deliver and leave a little basket of goodies on our doorstep. And every year we make it to the post office and we send mishloach manot to our kids. The 3rd mitzvah is the su'udah, or festive meal. And the 4th one, matanat le'evyonim, which is giving to the poor. So it's always good to give tzedakah, to give charity, but it's especially important to fulfill one of the mitzvot of Purim, to give gifts to the poor. All right. And Mordechai wrote these things and sent letters into all the Jews that were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far. What did he write? What am I referring to? These things? Well, Numbers 2, 3, and 4, they appear in the Megillah in chapter 9. Right? So we're not pulling this out of nowhere, but it actually says this is what you should do on Purim as a remembrance, as a day of remembrance, which I'll also parenthetically say also makes it connected to Yom Kippur, where we say Yizkor, right? When we say the prayer for remembering. So they should, Mordechai wrote these things to enjoin them, meaning the Jews, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness and of sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor. And again, I color-coded it. Days of feasting and gladness, that's the corresponds to the Su'udah, the festive meal. Sending portions to one another, that's mishloach manot, or gift baskets. And gifts to the poor is matanot la'evyonim. So, the last bit of the Slonimer that I'm going to draw upon is at the bottom of the page. So, it would seem that all these actions would require significant presence of mind, which doesn't sit right with the obligation to be drunk on Purim. But we can say that our work around this obligation is hinted at the very language. Each person is obligated to get drunk on Purim. It doesn't say that each person might get drunk on wine, but on Purim, that is to get drunk from Purim itself, is the Slonimer. And I suspect that Rabbi Shefa Gold, my friend and colleague and teacher of many of us, read the Slonimer, and she was aware of this teaching, and then passed it on in ways that only she can. All right, let's hold on here for a second. Comments, thoughts, questions, troubles.
For me, this gives different layers to Purim, and I mean, I have good memories of Purim. That the first time I celebrated, I wasn't Jewish yet. I was still in the convent, and our modern Orthodox business teacher in the school where we taught, couldn't wait for us to experience Purim and took us to a reading of the Megillah and then introduced us to Hamantashen. So there was a sense of having a meal or some like party together and things like that. But I I love the idea of thinking that there are mitzvot, and besides reading the Megillah, to look at how we can come together with others in community. Our our neighbors, our Orthodox neighbors give us hamantaschen, which they make homemade every year, and they drop them off in our house since they've been living there, and this makes much more sense. I don't even think I learned that much about the intoxication. Maybe I came too late to it. It
Okay.
wasn't served at Osei Shalom, and I just never knew that part of it.
Right. Well, if you had gone to Tiferet Israel or Addis Israel, yeah, where I've gone, in the past, there would be intoxicants galore. Steve is shaking his head because he knows. And
Yeah, if you
people
go
would
to
be people would be drinking while the Megillah was reading, right? And just mayhem, all over the place. Steve, yeah.
if you go to a Chabad one, it's even crazier.
Oh, that
And
sounds
I've been to several of those. It's amazing how drunk they get.
right. So I do want to make sure, Gail and Gail, you especially, Sandy. I don't want to assume that you're Jewish. Are you? Okay, a name like Fishman, but Purim is next Wednesday night and Thursday, right? So, which is why next Wednesday night, which is usually a day that I teach on, we're going to be doing some Purim spiel, which means just having fun with the holiday. It's typical to like make fun and have kind of like a parody, like a Saturday Night Live kind of send up of Purim, and people really go way out in doing it. A couple of other things that came to mind, which there's a teaching that when Mashiach comes, in the days of Messiah, there will only be two things celebrated: Shabbat and Purim. Shabbat and Purim. Why? Yivdu et Hashem b'simcha, right? And certainly Purim, we're encouraged to, when Adar comes in, to increase our joy. The other thing I wanted to say was about a married couple. Oh, I'll remember when I'm not trying to think of it. Okay, it was about a married couple. Purim. Can't remember. It doesn't matter. Okay, next. Anybody else? Ready? Okay, let's go back. So we just covered the 4 mitzvot of Purim. And now, without further ado, let's make sure before we end our time together that we have a review, a brief synopsis of the story of Purim, and I'm going to be asking for your help to fill in any blanks in the story. So this is, like I said, a review for all of us so that you don't have to go back and watch the entire movie. This is the Cliff Notes version. But that said, with that, it's the Moshe Notes version. I have picked out one or at most 2 psukim, 2 verses from each chapter, which I think are critical to our understanding of the story. So, what are the different parts, the synopsis? Somebody read through this list for us. Come on, Gail, go ahead.
All right. A brief synopsis: the party and Queen Vashti, the beauty contest, Mordecai to the rescue, the prime minister, Mordecai's request, the first feast, sleepless king and his diary, the second feast, the tables turn, the battle, in commemoration.
Thank you, Gail. Beautifully said. All righty. So we're going to get now to each of these pieces. But first, by the way, do you know that there are no less than 10 parties mentioned in the book of Esther? So if anybody wants to, from drinking too much, be my guest. All righty. Next. First, the 180-day party and Queen Vashti. Here's the line that I feel is critical. And then let's all together kind of like fill in the blanks, just so that we can all remember the more of the story. Then Memucan declared before the, they got the funniest names, don't they? Achashverosh's his right hand men. Then Memucan declared before the king and the princesses, not against the king alone has Vashti the queen done wrong, but against all the princes and the peoples that are in all of King Achashverosh's provinces. All right, somebody catch us up. What did Vashti do? Who is Vashti? She is Achashverosh's queen. Mary Rita, what did she do that is so bad? Well, how did she wrong the king?
She refused to come into the party.
Ah, yes. So there was a separate party for men and women. No mechitza. They just decided to do this big party for the men and women. What does the Midrash tell us? The reason is not only would she not come to the party, but how did she want her to appear at the party?
Naked.
Naked.
In her birthday suit, yes, naked at the party. Vashti, who is raised up by feminists everywhere to be a model for saying no, right? Meets her end. Right? Now, why do I point this out as a critical line? And there's going to be a through line to my thinking here, and I'm not going to make you guess. Not against the king alone has Vashti the queen done wrong, but against all the princes and all the peoples that are in all of King Achashverosh's provinces. Linda Landis, what's going on here?
The men were afraid that if Vashti said no and the no was accepted, that their wives might be inclined to do the same.
Ooh, yes. And wouldn't that lead to bad things for the guys? It'd be just like, what is that Greek play? It ain't Euripides. Oh, where the women refuse to have sex until the men stop having war. What, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you're shaking your head, but nobody else remembers. Okay, somebody do a Google. Okay, but that's absolutely right, Linda, but it's not where I'm headed to. Where I am headed to is the question, is this a true story? Did this happen? Is this history Scott Ryder is giving us a face that says, no way, Jose. Not a true story. But as Renee and I like to say to a child after we tell a cockamamie story, like it could always be worse, the story where they bring in all the animals into the house. And they say, is that a true story? Well, it might not have happened exactly that way, but it is a true story, meaning it has meaning. Because history does not necessarily have meaning, but memory does. And we have carried with us, for many reasons, this story, and which we'll see as we go forward. But what I want to uplift is the amazing amount of hyperbole in this line. Wait, Queen Vashti does something wrong to the king to upset him, and she has wronged all the princesses, but not only that, all the people in every province through all of the kingdom. Achashverosh's name itself, don't tell me it doesn't sound like a sneeze. All of this is intended to be a carnival. Why do you think the masks? And coming back to Purim and Yom Kippur. On Purim, we wear masks. Which is the real us? On Yom Kippur, we fast so that we come to the point, hopefully, that we feel like the angels themselves. We go into that state of non-duality, that state of everything is all, is one. Right? The beauty contest. Are we at that point yet? So now Ahasuerus needs a king. So I needs a new queen. I'm sorry. So what's the next thing that happens?
Well, doesn't,
Go ahead, Mary Rita.
okay, I think Mordecai brings Esther, who is like, he's responsible for, like,
Yeah, he hears about the beauty contest.
right. So he brings her to basically the harem, but he tells her, don't tell anybody what your heritage is. Don't let them know that you are Jewish.
Okay, so good. So that actually is a line that I pulled out. Esther did not reveal her nationality or her lineage, for Mordecai had ordered her not to reveal it. So this is more than hinting at the state of affairs in which the Jews are living under. If this is not a true story, then this is a major polemic, is it not? This is a teaching about the times we're living in, of what we're dealing with, and the fact that we're trying to maintain our identity within a pluralistic society. And we're going to get to the anti-Semitic underpinnings of the story in a minute. All right, so the beauty contest happens, right? And Esther is chosen among all of the women, right? And she pickles. They go into the harem for a long, long time, and they I once heard somebody refer to they pickled her, and all the other women, with perfumes and all this stuff for a really long time. Oy Gewalt, would I have been sneezing? After Esther is chosen and is not revealing her identity, Mordecai to the rescue. Because what happens? What does Mordecai overhear while sitting at the gates of the palace?
A plot to kill the king.
A plot to kill the king. I would have my music ready here. That was good. Good, like that, Scott. Yes, he overhears a plot to kill the king, and the matter became known to Mordecai. That's the matter. And he told to Queen Esther, and Esther told it to the king in Mordecai's name. Right? So we have a little bit of phone, what's it called? The telephone. Again, what's going on. Right? Mordecai hears it. He tells it to his, we're not exactly sure who, there's many stories about who Esther is. Now, let me back a little piece of important information. Esther name is Hadassah. Oh, that's where Hadassah comes from. Esther means to be hidden. Mm-hmm. To be hidden. What is hidden in the book of Esther? Who doesn't make an appearance on stage?
God.
You got it. So the understanding is God is working in the background. You ever see on your computer, it says, an app is running in the background. So divinity is running in the background all the time, unseen, just like those apps, right? Okay, let's continue here. Next, enter Haman. And we're supposed to blot out his name and make lots of noise, of course. The pivotal sentence in here for me is, O Mordechai lo yicharav lo yishtachaveh. Mordechai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself. So what's going on? Mordechai, for some reason, he likes to sit outside of the gates. Maybe he's keeping an eye on Esther, looking out for his niece. Who appears? Haman.
Haman.
I saw on the look of your face. Haman appears. And let's not hear from all the same people. Haman appears, and what is everyone supposed to do when Haman appears? Bow down.
Bow to Haman.
Bow to Haman. And he would, lo yichrav lo yishtachava. Mordecai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself before Haman. Now, I want you to know that there is nothing in Jewish law that forbids a Jew to kneel before another human being. Did you know that?
No.
Renee's grandfather was knighted by the King of Belgium for service to the nation. And Renee's grandfather, Orthodox Jew, what did he do? He knelt down and received the honor. Right? The author or authors of this story has got to pay attention that they're setting us up, right? And that this entire tale is about warnings, survival, hope, role models, of which we know now the difference, to know the difference between good and evil, which we are staring in the face right now, are we not? In our world. In the same chapter, and Haman said to King Achashverosh, here's a sneak preview of the anti-Semitism embedded in this. Just because we're Jews. There is a certain people scattered and separate amongst the peoples throughout all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws different from those of every people, and they do not keep the king's laws. It is therefore of no use for the king to let them be. Why? First of all, why is Haman telling the king about this? What's his mission? To kill the Jews, right? Why? He gets pissed off at Mordechai. Is this a man in his right mind? Is this a man who's being in a position of leadership? Well, this is certainly a man with issues, right? But the issue that I want to point out is that in the Talmud, there is an edict. There is an instruction for us. It's called Dina Malchuta Dina, right? Din is a law, right? A malchut, like a melech, right? A king. The law of the nation is the law. That is an obligation for us to be Americans, right? That we need to live as Americans, and we are a subset. Now, we might say that we are Jews first. That's fine, right? That's our identity, perhaps. But it doesn't circumvent around the laws of a nation, right? So him saying their laws differ from they don't keep the king's laws, that's just not true. That is a setup. That is written in here to set up what's to come, right? You're with me here?
Yep.
This is really important to keep track of because we don't get this when we were kids. And otherwise, we see this. We react to the story of Purim with great. We recoil from it. It's awful. Otherwise, in the events that occur. Last thing, talking about hyperbole from in same chapter 3, verse 9. Again, this is Haman speaking when he goes to the king to tell him that these people, right, should be wiped out. They don't follow your laws. Remember this king, he's drunk all the time. Right? If it pleases the king, let it be written to destroy them, and I will weigh out 10,000 silver talents into the hands of those who perform the work. So in other words, he's going to hire or he's going to use mercenaries to kill the Jews and pay them. The biblical talent weighed approximately 30 kilograms. 10,000 talents would weigh 300,000 kilograms or 30 tons. In modern dollars, this value would be approximately $315 million. It actually sounds like more than that, but that's what I got from Rabbi Google this morning. Okay. This ain't happening, my friends. This amount of money might have been more than all the money that was in the king's coffers. And he's going to pay the mercenaries to do this? For goodness sake, it's the king. Why would they have to pay? So again, keep track of the number of times where things are blown out of proportion for us to understand that this did not happen, right? For us to shake our heads in the way that Scott, you shaked your head before when I asked, is this historically true? Continuing. Chapter 4. Mordecai learns of the plot, right? Of course, Esther learns of the plot. And what does Mordecai do? He goes to Esther and tells her what? Scott, did you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, but I was going to let someone else talk, but no.
Anybody else? Marlena, did you want to say?
He tells her to go to the king,
Yeah. He says,
which is a scary prospect
absolutely. Why?
because he's got a scepter and things may not go well.
That's right. And what? He might give her a zest on top of the head with it. Oh, and you can't go to the king without an invitation. You have
Yes.
to be asked to come to the king. You can't just like waltz in. Of course, if it's Esther, she's right. She's quite beautiful. But he asks her to take on this obligation. He brings down the seriousness of what's going on here. If not you, and I find this on this day to be so moving in light of what Volodymyr Zelensky, so I was made for this moment. It feels like he was made for this moment. He didn't say that, but it feels like he was made for this moment, right? So in the same way, it felt like Esther, that character is being told, you were made for this moment. Step into your greatness. And what does she say? Avarti, avarti. If I perish, I perish. Just to reiterate what I said before about names, Mordecai comes from the pagan god Marduk and Esther from Ishtar. And Esther means to be hidden. Alrighty. Next, the first feast, chapter 5. So Zeresh is, Steve, you got your hand up?
Yes. On that hidden thing, I read something that she was kind of looked at as the first Marrano, and that the Marrano Jews in Spain during the Inquisition looked at her as a patron saint to them because they had to practice in hiding like she did. So I just thought that it's interesting that Esther means hidden, and that the Spanish Jews of the Inquisition looked at her as the saint.
Right, beautiful. And that raises even a meta thing of how we've had to live through history, hiding. Basically, I started wearing a kippah a number of years ago because it came to me one day that why should they, meaning the Orthodoxim, get to say, what's Jewish? It came as a realization one day. I was eating at a restaurant. It wasn't a kosher restaurant, but I was eating, a vegetarian meal. It's a longer story, which I won't go into. But if I go out, if I go to Israel, I'm wearing my kippah all the time. But there are some places I'm going to put my baseball cap on because it's just not safe, right? The first feast, Zeresh, his wife. Whose wife? Haman's wife. And all of his friends said, let them make a gallows 50 cubits high, and in the morning say to the king that they should hang Mordecai on it. Go to the king to the banquet joyfully. Let's build a gallows. And that is, sorry, I'm yelling right now. Let's build a gallows intended, right? And then have fun with it. Maybe they got, isn't this great? Ha, ha, ha. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. The matter pleased Haman, and he made the gallows. All right, my friends, you know how high 50 cubits is? 75 feet high. What were they building? The Tower of Babel? Again, pay attention to the details of the story to let you know what's going on here. Next page. Sleepless king in his diary. So one night the king can't sleep. He orders a diary because if anything could put him to sleep is reading from the royal diary. And Haman entered, and the king said, so what is read from the diary? What was written into the diary? We mentioned it before. Has to do with Mordecai. Anybody?
It's the plot. He read that it was Mordecai that
That's right.
saved him, and
That's
he
right.
really didn't realize that.
Right. So we'll read in the Megillah that Mordecai reporting on the plot to kill King Ahasuerus is written into the king's diary. And evidently he doesn't read it very often. And he asks, to be put to sleep with. It's like counting sheep. Read me from my diary. And Haman comes in after it's been read to Ahasuerus about, Mordecai, what he did for him. And so he asks Haman, hey, buddy, what should be the honor paid to a man whom the king wishes, to honor? And Haman thinks, ooh, this is so Trump-like, is it not? It's like, isn't everything about me, right? Who would the king wish to honor more than me, right? It's speaking to like, blow up an ego 1,000 times and you've got Haman. Alrighty. And so what, of course, happens in the story? Anybody want to fill in the blank? What happens after that? What does the king say? How it should be honored?
I think that he ends up Mordecai is on the horse, and he has to take the horse and Mordecai through the town street.
Exactly right. That's right. And so, do you think Haman is happy about this? No. So Haman's need for revenge has been growing and growing and growing, and the plan is growing and growing and growing as we move on. Next. The tables turn. So, oh, no. I skipped the page. Woohoo. I skipped the second feast. Sorry. So the king and Haman came to drink with Queen Esther. There's more drinking. And the king said to Esther, also on the second day during the wine feast, what is your petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to, sorry, I'm doing a bad Sanford and Sons imitation. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, and it shall be granted. Come on, really? Half the kingdom? I don't think so. But this is, remember, who's there? Haman's there, Esther's there. Esther tells Ahasuerus about the plot, and which leads, of course, to Haman's immediate demise, and he hangs from the gallows that were intended for Mordecai. And that's the next point in the next chapter. V'yitlu et Haman. They hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's anger abated. King gets angry at Haman, right? He loves his queen. And finally he wakes up because he tells her the truth. And then, of course, comes the battle. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's ring. And he sent letters by couriers on horseback, the riders of the king's steeds, the camels, bred of the dromedaries. It's kind of reading like a Western, right? That the king had given to the Jews who are in every city to assemble and protect themselves. Check out all of the verbs. To protect themselves, to destroy, to slay, to cause to perish the entire host of every people and province that oppress them, small children and women, and to take their spoils for plunder. This is all hyperbole. Now, that said, let us beware a moment of our true history when, what's his name, Baruch, when he shot up the tomb, right, and killed on the eve of Purim, right? The danger is reading this as history. There's a danger in it, which is why some of us have such a hard time. But if we pay attention to the violence, right, and the numbers, which I'm getting to in a second, right, of 75,000 people that were slain. But before we get there, La Yehudim hayata ora v'simcha v'sason v'ikar, from the book of Esther. When do we say these words as a part of our regular weekly ritual? What is it a part of? La Yehudim hayata ora v'simcha v'sason v'ikar came to Hilanu, and then it's repeated by whoever's around.
Havdalah.
It's Havdalah, right? It's Havdalah. Pay attention next time you hear Havdalah. You're going to hear these words from the book of Esther, right? And the Jews had light and joy and gladness and honor. And the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces assembled and protected themselves and had rest from their enemies and slew their foes, 75,000. But upon the spoil, they did not lay their hands. So they're instructed that they can not only kill these people, but they can take what is not theirs. Do they do it? No. 75,000 people. Okay, so my friends, 75,000 is less than the 100,000 that I mentioned last Shabbat in the Chmielnicki massacres in the pogrom, right? That's a real number. This is a made-up number, which brings us to my point that I've been making all throughout. The entire story is told in a series of wild and unbelievable exaggerations. The numbers and the duration of the drinking banquets, empire-wide political intrigues, caricatured and outrageous characters and events. And there was no known Jewish queen of Persia named either Esther or Hadassah. These literary effects indicate the story was to be taken as a broad farce, and we put on masks and costumes to celebrate it, because it's easier to laugh and it's important to laugh. And maybe that's what's gotten us through, right? And that this story is a story of survival against a Holocaust, right? Against an intended Holocaust. Finishing up in commemoration. And these days shall be remembered, Yizkor, right? And celebrated throughout every generation and every family, every province, every city. And these days of Purim shall not be revoked from amidst the Jews, and their memory shall not cease from their seed, right? Here is the mitzvah to remember Amalek, where it comes from. For Mordechai, the Jew, was viceroy to King Ahasuerus, run the credits, and great among the Jews and accepted by most of his brethren. You know, I have to look up the commentaries for that. I didn't, but that cracked me up. That cracks me up. And I'm not quite sure what that's about, but I'll report to you.
It's about 10 Jews, 11 opinions.
That's right. Seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all his seed. Keep in mind that all of our prayers end with peace. Oseh shalom b'mromav, right? All of our prayers lead to peace. That line, end of every Kaddish, the Kaddish at the end of every section. All righty. So there we have, my friends, a little unpacking of perhaps what we might bring with us to Purim next Wednesday night, which is a sneak preview. I'm going to be wrapping synopsis of some of the chapters. We need one. Oh, no, we don't. To any of you, Mary Rita, you're going to be chanting. So we fulfill the obligation. Some verses from the Megillat Esther. Make sure you send me the verses that you're going to be reading.
I will. Like right now, I have verses from chapter 5, but I took down all the verses that you were highlighting tonight.
Great.
I'm going to go back and see if there's anything I can pick up.
Good. I can send you this, and you can, if you need it, just let me know.
Right. You know, there's only so much I can learn. And 5, I know 5, especially where there are lots of Hamans. You know?
Exactly.
And I knew you were rapping, so I was, you know, I was going to like grab you after this or whatever and say, but, you know, I did take lots of notes from tonight. And
Great.
the thing that really struck me tonight is, even at the very end, how timely this is. You know, that it's good that we can have some joy at a time when our hearts are also breaking at the Holocaust that we are seeing around us, you know.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts? Carol Ann. Caroline, you're muted, my friend.
A question, so this took place in what was Persia, right?
Right.
And well, who are these people that they slaughtered? What was their backgrounds? I don't know anything about that.
They're
the
they're
I
the
mean,
people
it's
in the
the
province.
Jews ended up
Right.
various parts of Persia.
Right. Well, although these are the people, our understanding, according to the writings and commentary about this, who were they were co-conspirators.
Oh,
You might look at them underneath that rubric.
mhm.
Don't ask me how,
Yeah.
but they were so they were the ones who think that Hillary was running a cadre at Pizza, Planet Pizza, whatever that's called.
I
I'm
got
sorry,
it.
Comet Pizza. Yeah.
who were the co-conspirators? I missed something there.
The 75,000 who were slaughtered.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So they
Yeah.
didn't go out willy-nilly just slaughtering, according to the commentary, just anybody, but those who sought to kill them.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a big empire. There were all kinds of people
Right.
in it.
Right.
And isn't theoretical, well, it says at the beginning of the book that Mordecai was a descendant of people, and presumably people who were exiled to Babylon and didn't go back, and Persia conquered Babylonia, and that's how they
And
got
perhaps
to
a
be.
member of the Great Assembly. So he wasn't just a schnook. He was a macha, right? He was a big deal.
Mm.
Any last word before we say goodnight? Sandy Fishman, so happy to have you with us. I hope you can join us on a day that we're being devotional on Sabbath morning. You're always welcome. And thank you, everybody, for your holy presence as always. Let us